Extension of the Bassendean Seniors Community Kitchen. Any questions?
No, happy to move.
So it's moved. Councillor Gangel. Councillor Hamilton.
I had an amendment.
Okay, so hold on. Councillor Gangel's moved it.
Yeah.
Do we need a
So we have to
seconder?
deal with that.
Yeah. Councillor Mikachuk. Okay, so now you've got an amendment. Councillor Gangel has to agree to your amendment.
Substantially different from
Councillor Gangel,
Yes.
I have an amendment with your indulgence. Point C of the officer's recommendation, pretty much the same until I've got, so the facility be made available.
Sorry, Councillor Hamilton. Councillor Gangel, I believe she's given you a copy of her proposed amendment.
So shall I read it out?
Yes.
Okay. The facility to be made available to Mr. Gale for 1 day per week, with additional days being made available, and I've got there to a total of 16 free of charge hours per week, with the approval of the CEO, and that any additional hours over and above 16 hours per week be subject to the standard hourly rate applicable for venue hire, which I think is $15 an hour or something. And then item D, I've put request the applicant to work with officers of the town to deliver an activity and or service at no cost at a minimum of once every 3 months for the benefit of the community in return for using the premises free of charge or no charge.
Okay, can I just ask a question? So in the report there was some reference to suggestion of the user providing a service to the community, but that's not reflected in the current officer recommendation, I believe. Was there a reason for that?
No, that was just going to be done administratively.
Okay, so the intention would be to have that discussion and encourage the current user.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so Councillor Gangel?
Yeah, happy with the amendments.
Okay, Councillor Mikachuk is the seconder. Were you the seconder?
No.
You are the seconder?
Yeah. Oh, that's what I had there.
You seconded.
You did
Okay.
second. I'm
What
pretty
was
sure
your
you did.
amendment again?
So are you saying no, you're not seconding?
I'll second it.
You're seconding, and are you supportive of the amendment?
I didn't intend to second it.
Okay.
If I need to keep going with that, I will, but
Okay.
Sorry, I feel like this amendment's substantially different
To the officer.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
probably
Okay.
what
Yes.
I
Yeah.
would have said
This
as
is
well.
totally different.
Okay.
Okay, so Councillor Gangel, okay, so we've got the officer
We'll
recommendation
do it
moved
standalone as a.
as a foreshadowed motion.
Foreshadowed,
So Councillor
yep.
Gangel has moved it. I believe Councillor Mikachuk has seconded it.
Yes, I
yes.
think that's what I was intending
original
to do
motion?
too.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep, so you can refuse to support the amendment anyway. So is there anybody against the officer recommendation? Okay, all those in favour, and we won't get to consider her foreshadowed motion in that case. Okay, so now, hold on. All those in favour of the officer recommendation without the amendment. So we've got Councillor Wilson, Gangel, Mikachuk, Quinton, Brown and McLennan. So that is passed 6-1. Okay, thank you. 10.6, the facilities audit. Question? Amendment?
I have an extra dot point.
Sure. So this is the one, do you want to read out your additional point? So you're moving it with this additional dot point?
Yep. Dot point 4, so it's the officer's recommendation, exactly as is. Dot point 4, that the Community Facilities, Ovals and Reserves Audit Needs Assessment be reviewed annually by the Assets Committee prior to the creation of draft budgets, and that said committee provides recommendations to Council in respect to what projects, if any, from this document may be included for consideration in the draft budget prior to their implementation.
So essentially you're requesting that it goes to the Town Assets Committee each year before any decisions are made about implementation. Okay, so we've got a mover with that amendment. Is there a seconder for Councillor Wilson? Is there anybody against? All
I
those
just need a moment to consider.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, there's someone against, yeah.
Okay, so Councillor Hamilton.
The only reason I've put that in is the Community Facilities audit had quite a number of smaller projects, but there has been discussion amongst councillors about asset renewal, how we have older buildings that need substantial upgrading or in fact replacing. So my reason for moving this amendment is it would be advantageous if the Assets Committee that has a hands-on control or oversight over our assets looks at this audit each year to ascertain what is relevant for that year, what is not, perhaps even gives council input into updating some of the information. And it's just a recommendation. The committee has no ability to do anything. It has no delegated authority. It can only give recommendations to council. So whatever they recommend will come before council, a full council in any case.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Waiving my right to speak.
Councillor Gadget.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, I think the amendment is a bit overly cumbersome on the process that we undertake for budgeting. This is a holistic review of facilities within the town. I would think the officers would be better placed to do an internal audit of the conditions of the facilities and priorities of which require budgetary attention. Obviously, the committee wouldn't be across, I wouldn't have thought, all the facilities within the town, their various uses. There'll certainly be potentially some people on the committee that maybe use a particular venue or facility that believes they should be put in front of another venue within the town, despite what our consultants and internal auditing has suggested, and plus the additional time frame to try and get a budget process together. As we know, this year councillors were at times frustrated with the timing to get the budget together for councils to examine, and I think that this, whilst well-meaning, may add another cumbersome hurdle to that process. Thank you.
Okay, further speakers? Councillor Hamilton.
This annual review can be held at any time, and I don't think it would add to the timeline of creating the budget, particularly if it's done at the budget review time in, say, February. I somewhat object to the assertion that members of the Asset Committee might favour some asset or group in preference to others. I think we're all fairly even-handed around this table. So I don't see it as being cumbersome. I see it as simply being an ability to make recommendations to council.
Okay, so put that to the vote. All those in favour with the amendment? So that's Councillor McLennan, Wilson, Mikachuk, Hamilton and Quinton, and against Councillor Gangel and Brown, so that is carried. 10.7, this is the Mary Crescent Playground. So I've had some discussions with Mr Haggett about this, and understandably I think everybody in this room is a bit frustrated about the obstacles that have been in the path of this process. Mr Haggett, now if I understand correctly, there was going to be some, or maybe you, Mr Jarvis, with Walga about why the preferred providers did not return a compliant
That's
tender?
correct, Your Worship. The Walga were as concerned as we were that their preferred suppliers did not respond to a tender. There is no point having a preferred suppliers list who are supposed to respond to tenders by local government if they don't. And we've asked for Walga to provide us with a formal response, so we're expecting that fairly soon. And looking at the tender and what was in it, I can't see why any, if not all, of these playground companies could not have responded. So we're trying to find out what went wrong here.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a question. Is there anything preventing us from putting it out to tender to people beyond Walga's list of so-called?
That's what we're intending to do now.
Do you mean in tandem with the Walga preferred providers?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm curious why an approach wasn't taken that would have seen the tender go out to all interested and possible parties.
I can answer that. The reason why we go to the Walga preferred suppliers list is because they go out initially to a very wide group, so that we don't have to spend that money on an open tender process. Unfortunately, it hasn't worked, and so we're now required to go to a wider tender process. But normally, it's a means of saving time and money, because they've already done that much broader advertising process.
Councillor Mikitchuk?
Yeah, I just have a question on that. I seem to recall that in the report and maybe supporting information that there was potentially an option about going back to the individual tenderers to see if they wanted to submit. I apologise if that's not accurate. Maybe I could just get some clarification on that, aside from going back and understanding why they didn't submit.
So those that came to do the site visit, is that what you're referring to? Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
So we did go back to them.
Oh, you did, thank you.
And they, for whatever reason, said that they couldn't. So.
Okay, thank you for answering that.
Okay, and so in discussion with Mr Haggett or Mr Costello, I can't remember now which one, the plan would be if we pass this to put it out ASAP, as in this weekend.
Yes,
Yes.
Yeah.
the project would be advertised on Saturday.
So do we have a mover for the officer recommendation? Councillor Mikitchuk, seconded by Councillor Quinton. Anyone against? All those in favour? Passed unanimously. 10.8 Surrey Street project. Questions? Okay. Do we have Councillor Hamilton?
Someone else can go before me.
I'm not sure. This is Councillor Gangel.
Yes, happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Okay, is there a seconder for the officer's recommendation? Councillor Mikitchuk. Is there anybody against? Councillor Hamilton, Councillor Gangel.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, this project has been ongoing for, say, a number of years. Would be an understatement. This actually predates my time on council, which is a considerable period now. This is a situation where it was grant funded, it was supported, it was budgeted in the budget. My understanding, what has occurred over time, is that potentially deals between former councillors were done for support on various other projects, and therefore it went into a bit of turmoil, the project, and now we've sort of come to the stage where we are tonight. I would urge councillors to support the officer recommendation. This has certainly been years of work within the community, committed community people that have been tirelessly working to get this project running and finalised. This is a state heritage listed facility that we have in the town. In fact, it is quite shameful, to say the least, that over successive councils it's been left derelict to go to rack and ruin, where it's potentially at the stage of needing demolition by neglect. Now, I don't want it to get to that stage. We have a Lotteries West grant here. We've heard earlier that this will be the last time the town will be able to get such a sizable grant for Lotteries West. I understand we are also trying to work with other community groups as well and facilities to co-locate various people there. I believe that whilst all parties, and maybe none of the parties are ultimately 100% satisfied, the parties understand that there needs to be give and take and agreement to ensure that this opportunity is not lost, and also our heritage in the town is also not lost along with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mikitchuk.
Yes, I'd like to touch on some of Councillor Gangel's points, and I think he raised quite a few important ones. We all know this project has been going for a long time. We value the history and heritage of our town and acknowledge not only do we have an obligation, but we also have core values, I think, that align with restoring and preserving the building. I think also, as Councillor Gangel said, you know, maybe there is no one that is completely happy, but the reality is life and big decisions are about compromise, and I think this solution meets a compromise where we hopefully honour and can interpret the history of the building, and we can also provide valuable, much needed services to our communities, families and children. And I would really like to hope that maybe if this proceeds, that there can be some great synergies and some positive outcomes that maybe we didn't imagine. And I think, you know, there are some wonderful connections in a family residence that is very important, and families coming together. And I think that can be more congruent than we ever thought. And I'd just like to urge people to support the officer recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton?
Perhaps instead of arguing against the motion, perhaps with Councillor Gangel's indulgence, he might consider an amendment to go into the... I do agree with you, Councillor. Sorry, let me just... I would like to have an amendment in point 4, so an additional dot point there, to scale back some aspects of the 2C design to achieve a reduction in overall proposed expenditure.
So just to clarify, one of the things that you flagged with me is potentially the studio space. Is that
Yes.
the kind of thing that you're talking about?
Yeah. And I do think that, you know, there is the ability to scale back some aspects.
Okay, so hold on a moment.
Yep.
Councillor Gangel, not will. Okay, so you'll have to foreshadow that as a motion for councillors to consider if they don't want to support the motion as it currently stands.
Okay.
So you're speaking against the current motion
yep.
then?
I actually agree with most of what you've said, Councillor Gangel. I believe that previous councils have somewhat neglected the property, so that we now find ourselves holding the bag and needing to spend money on this, otherwise it will fall down. So in principle, I support much of this officer's recommendation. However, I also know that a point of discussion around this table at workshops has been the cost of the project. And so I would like to see some ability for the staff to review some aspects of the project, not all of it, just some aspects, to reduce the cost where possible. I don't think that is a terribly onerous thing to ask. So in this respect, I will argue against the officer's recommendation, because I do want to get in some aspect which constrains the costs, because otherwise this could well be a deep well where we throw a lot of money at it. There is another aspect where we did ask, or I asked the Mayor and some of the staff previously, if the National Trust, WA I think it is, would look at some form of assisting in this project, and we got back a response that seemed to be a little bit open-ended. And I wouldn't mind investigating that a little bit further, because I do think that when we come to things like the creative spaces, the interpretation, I did get a sense from the workshop that there were differing views. It didn't seem to have a great deal of focus, and I am concerned that the historical property, once it is renovated or restored, that we may not make the most use of it. So I would also like to open the door to more discussion with the National Trust.
Good timing. Okay, thank you. Can I just seek some clarification from the staff? So if the officer recommendation is passed as it is currently written, there will be opportunities for further discussion and potentially scaling back some of them as part of the process going forward anyway, is that correct?
Scaling back what?
So for example, if council wanted to remove the studio space, there is the option for that.
Yes, look, the current, when we prepared the previous specifications and to going out for tender, we designed it so that that the separable portions for the studio space, or what could be now used as a multifunctional space for the community now. And so potentially when we went out to tender, that it would show the total value, and then you could, if it was too much money, you could take that component out of the project if council so desired when the tender came back for consideration.
Okay, thank you. Okay, further. Sorry, do you have a question?
Can I ask the officer? I mean, we do have budget allocation of 52,000 for remodelled architect drawings. Surely if we take out some of these things prior to the architect redoing the drawings, we can save some money rather than waiting until it's all gone out to tender.
I guess.
Through the chair. I'm at a loss of kind of, I mean, you've mentioned the studio space that you'd like to take out. There is an opportunity for council to take that out in the future when the tender comes back.
Any changes proposed by this current wouldn't impact on the design of that space.
No,
so that's not
you're simply adopting it at this stage. You're giving direction to staff to undertake to bring it back a final plan. I think the report's saying that there's going to be another report plan brought back to you, which would further articulate what you're deciding tonight. So just from a concept perspective.
Thank you. Okay, so Councillor Hamilton has spoken against. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Councillor Ganjul.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, this is a project that needs to be undertaken. I don't know. Quite understand the reluctance of spending on infrastructure, and certainly on our history. This is one of the few state-listed heritage places that we have in the town. Bringing it back to its original glory will be a massive benefit for the town. And I've always been of the belief that once you actually build it and make it a usable facility, an attractive facility, people will actually want to use the facility. Case in example is the library that was rebuilt with the community rooms in the library. People always want to use those community rooms. We don't have enough community rooms. If there was community space provided, regardless of what it was used for, the community would actually use that space in a nicely renovated, architecturally designed, heritage listed building. It'll be a wonderful, fantastic asset to the town. We've now got it on the motion. It's almost back to square one. If we could rewind the clock back 18 months, potentially tonight we would be celebrating the opening of Surrey Street rather than debating whether or not we go out and yet again try and get this project completed. But please, councillors, I implore you to do just that. Thank you.
Okay, let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? Because that is Councillor McLennan, Wilson, Ganjul, Mikachuk, Hamilton, Quinton and Brown. That is passed unanimously. Thank goodness. Okay, 10:11, Economic Development Committee meeting. Councillor Hamilton, you wanted that pulled out of my block?
Only because I had a question.
Busy.
Okay, the smart.
Busy.
I'm sure it's not
It's
smart
busy.
bus.
It's busy.
Not
So yeah,
busy.
in the officer or the committee recommendation, there's just a typo. It says smart
Smart
bus. It says
busy
smart busy.
program.
It's in the rest of the report, actually.
Yeah. I actually can't find it straight away, but I think that was it 15,000 or 5,000? I can't remember now. Because I did see it somewhere, now I can't see it.
So what's your question in relation
I'm
to?
curious about endorses the implementation of the Smart Busy program for business, which
So that's the talks to encourage entrepreneurship. Is that correct, members of the Economic Development Committee?
That's correct. That's correct, Your Worship. It's a series of forums, for want of a better word, that business people can attend. It goes over, I think, a series of 5 weeks. To memory, that will give them an outline of how to rationalise their time whilst trying to maintain a busy business.
Can I just ask a question on that? Because if I remember correctly, it was offered to maybe something like 32 people. If you don't get enough people from the business community, is the plan to open that up to others that may not be involved in local business?
Well, I would suggest that, yeah, I would think it'd be up to the town. The town, I wouldn't think council would have an issue with that. So if people wish to attend, would love to. It's subsidised by the town.
Great. So was that your only question, Councillor Hamilton?
Well, I was curious. I just was curious about the expenditure, the way the financial considerations was written. I just found it a little bit difficult to understand the actual program, but you've explained it. So,
okay. So do we have a mover for the officer recommendation? Councillor Mikachuk, seconder. Councillor Gangel, all those in favour? It's passed unanimously. 10:17, the calendar. I just wanted to flag that there was the Walga AGM missing from this, so that's on the 1st of August at 1 o'clock, so that just needs to be amended, and then I'm happy to move the officer recommendation with that amendment. Is there a seconder? Councillor Quinton, all those in favour? It's passed unanimously. Implementation of council resolutions. Councillor Hamilton, you had some.
yes. The second resolution, which is one of my motions, it says the processes are in place for briefing of councillors after the election, but that motion had 4 dot points that related to various...
No, it actually talks about the other processes being in place, and the briefing of councillors after election is now in the councillors' manual.
Okay, so the
There's
other...
actually a full stop between
Yep.
the two.
So the other processes, I haven't actually...
So can I just suggest maybe that we remove that from the council resolutions that haven't been implemented, and we can follow it up
Yep.
at a later time?
Yep.
So that's the second one, ROC 18/60873. So that's coming off. And was there another one that you had concerns about?
The Audit and Governance Committee, the last dot point, or the second, on the bottom of that page actually, there are some matters there which this doesn't explain what matters have all been dealt with. For instance, there was one that was sending a letter to the, I can't remember which minister now.
Okay, I know what you speak about. So again, let's remove that and...
Well, it's Mr. Costello is the one who actually did that.
So Councillor Hamilton has queries about some of them not having been completed, so she'd like to follow up before that it's removed from the items. So are they the only two? So Amy, that was ROC. ROC, it's the ROC 18/62198. Any others of concern?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, so we have a mover for the officer recommendation with those amendments.
Sorry, just for my benefit, could you reiterate the amendments?
All we're doing is removing the first
The second one
resolution
and
the last one on the first page. Yes.
So are we 10.18?
Yes. So
Okay,
all we're doing is Councillor Hamilton has some queries about whether they have been completed in full.
Okay.
So we're just removing them so they won't be deleted.
Thank you.
So all those in favour? That's passed unanimously.
Sorry, I didn't first seconded that. Councillor Hamilton.
I'll second it. Apologies. Okay, so now we're moving on to 13.1, which is confidential business. So do we have a...
Go behind closed doors.
Yep, move to go behind closed doors. A seconder, Councillor Hamilton. All those in favour? That's passed unanimously.